Hello, thank you for joining us in our discussion on Section 45Q and carbon capture and sequestration. I'm Susan Lafferty.
And I'm Amish Shah.
In 2008, Congress originally enacted Section 45Q, a tax credit related to certain carbon capture and sequestration activities.
So the original 45Q actually had a lot of flaws in it, and very few, if any, taxpayers actually took advantage of that. And so because of that, in February of 2018, Congress significantly amended 45Q. And so under the new 45Q, for example, a carbon capture facility that captures 500,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide or carbon oxide is entitled to a $260 million tax credit over 12 years. And if they secure double that, the credit is doubled and so forth. And so this is a very large tax credit, and large dollar amounts are associated with this, and it's gotten the attention of a lot of folks in the industry. So the new 45Q actually still left a lot of gaps in the statute, which were needed to be filled in by the IRS and Treasury. And so just this week, IRS and Treasury issued the first two pieces of guidance on 45Q since the enactment of the new 45Q tax credit.
So before we get into that new guidance, let's get a little bit into the mechanics of 45Q.
So when I think about the mechanics of 45Q, I think about that in two parts: carbon capture and sequestration. On the carbon capture requirements, you must capture qualified carbon oxide, which is carbon dioxide or carbon oxide, must be captured from a direct air capture facility or an industrial facility. And an industrial facility is what we normally think of as a sort of facility that emits carbon dioxide. And you must capture it using carbon capture equipment. So there are a lot of defined terms here, but the new guidance defines each of these terms.
And then with regards to sequestration, there are three prongs. First prong is use of the carbon in enhanced oil or natural gas recovery. And then you have disposal in a secure geological storage. The second prong is actual direct disposal into secure geological storage. And the third prong?
Well, the third prong is innovative uses for commercial purposes. And there needs to be guidance associated with that for us to understand exactly what that means and how that will be used. And we're anticipating guidance on that point. And speaking of guidance, as we mentioned, there was guidance that was issued on January 19th. And the first piece of guidance is the begin construction guidance. So in order to be entitled to this tax credit, construction must begin before the end of 2023. So what does it mean to begin construction? Those of you who have been in the renewables industry will recognize the begin construction guidance for 45Q is very similar to the begin construction guidance for wind, solar, and other renewable energy facilities. You can begin construction one of two ways. You can have actual physical work, and the guidance provides great examples of what is actual physical work in the context of a carbon capture and sequestration facility, or you can pay or incur 5% or more of the total project costs. And once you do that, you still have to have continuous progress with respect to the project. And that requirement, what we call the continuity requirement, is automatically satisfied if the project is placed in service within 6 years, which is a great development. For the renewables industry, it was a 4-year requirement. And if you don't do that, then you have to, under a facts and circumstances analysis, have continuous construction.
So Amish, it's just been released, but what is the reaction from the community at this point?
So we've spent a lot of time over the last several days talking with clients and other contacts in the industry with whom we're working. And the reaction's been very positive. So this begin construction guidance, as I mentioned, is very similar to guidance that we're familiar with in the renewables industry. And a lot of the investors in the renewable industry we expect will be investors in 45Q as well. And so it helps with the transition that this guidance is very, very similar to what we've seen in the renewables industry. And when we talk about investors, what we're talking about are generally tax equity investors. And so, as I mentioned before, these credits can be very large. And so there need to be mechanisms to monetize these tax credits, and we expect those mechanisms to be similar to what we're using in the renewables industry. So similar to the renewables industry, which had Revenue Procedure 2007-65, they issued very similar guidance here for 45Q in the form of Revenue Procedure 2020-12. And what that does is it says if you are a tax equity investor and you meet certain criteria that are outlined in this revenue procedure, that under a safe harbor, you'll automatically be treated as an equity owner. And it's important to be treated as an equity owner because if you're not treated as an equity owner, the investor isn't entitled to an allocation of the 45Q tax credit. So this guidance has been welcomed by the industry because it provides a certainty that tax equity investors need to be able to invest in these sorts of facilities. But as we said, there are a lot of gaps in 45Q. A number of them have been filled in this week, but there are still some more gaps to be filled in.
That's exactly right, and we're hoping that there will be some future guidance that address these issues. And some of the issues include what constitutes secure geologic storage, when and if there is any recapture necessary, and then how do you measure the carbon that is sequestered. We think in a lot of the cases there are existing programs, often run by the Environmental Protection Agency, that can adequately address these issues. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like any further information, please go to eversheds-sutherland.com.